Okay, so Debbie, welcome to Chat with Matt. Debbie has been a good person and come to our Westport meeting every year. And there is rarely a time when everyone hasn't learned a tremendous amount. Debbie, do you have a copy of your book?
Oh, shoot.
All right. Don't worry.
I can get one if you can give me a second. It's right in my other room.
Not necessary. So if everybody looks, there's a copy of Nail It by Debbie Fay. If you follow the link to her website, you can, I hope, order a copy. It's not a big book, and there's a lot of great stuff in it. So I'm going to turn this back over to Debbie.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about Debbie Fay and her life. So Debbie, how'd you get into this? You've been a professional presenter for how long now?
Since I started my own business in 2006, in the summer of 2006, as a public speaking coach and presentations consultant. Before that, I had spent about 5 years at a business school teaching English and all the communications courses that were offered there, one of which was presentations. And before that, for 7 years, I had the beloved moniker of the talent show lady at my kids' elementary school for 7 years, where I directed their talent show of 150 kids, teachers, and parents.
Wow, it's a great way to get started.
You know, Matt, over the years, I've found over and over again that getting a 6-year-old on stage is in some ways not so different from getting a 60-year-old on stage. So there is that similarity, and I've always loved helping people get on stage and be themselves and deliver their message. It's something I used to torture my cousins with when we were all tiny. So it's been going on forever.
Yeah, I would tell you that the beginning of my career, if I had to give a 1-minute speech, I had to have an index card with the whole thing written out.
Wow.
And now I've run so many meetings, I kind of ad-lib everything.
Right.
The more you do anything, the more you practice something, the better you get at it.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yep. So why don't you tell us about the book and what prompted you to write it?
I began writing the book when I started my business. I love to write. I was an English minor and a history major, so I wrote all through college, and I enjoy writing. And you know, I was building a presentations training course because I've developed curriculum in my previous career. And so I was building this presentations course. You know, when you start a business, as many people on this call may know, they either may be thinking of starting a business or have started a business or are related to someone who's an entrepreneur. When you start your business, despite the fact that I was out networking all the time, several times a week, there's still lots of time in my office when I was sitting there needing something to do to keep me going, to keep me positive and focused. And so I would write about different aspects of presentations and public speaking. And that was really the foundation of what became the book.
Yeah, I have found that if I write things down, I understand them better.
Well, and you've been writing, you know this. I've been trying to talk you into putting all of your newsletters into a book for over a decade now. So, and by the way, that's how a lot of my material for my book came from my newsletter that I sent out virtually from the start of my business. Probably maybe my second year of my business, I sent out a monthly newsletter about all things public speaking and presentations. And a lot of that ended up in the book as well.
Sure. So we're now into COVID-19, and I think your business was primarily focused on in-person presentations, people standing up in front of a large group and delivering death by PowerPoint.
Right, right. And so here's the thing, as you know, because we've known each other for so long, I've been preaching about best practices for visual aids forever. And unless I was working with somebody one-on-one, it was hard for me to convince my audience of the importance of having visual aids that are truly aids for the audience, not speaker notes, for the presenter, which is what PowerPoint slides typically are. They're bullets upon bullets of text, because the speaker is convinced of two things. Number one, if all that text isn't behind him or her, then he or she will not remember all of the important points they need to say. So that's the first thing, the first mistaken thought. And then the second mistaken thought is that if it's not on the screen in back of me, my audience will not know it and thus not remember it. And nothing could be more wrong. Having text on a screen in back of you while you are talking only does one thing, and that is causes, now I'm forgetting the name of the term, it causes really short-circuiting of the processors in working memory that process language, because you're asking that part of your brain to work double time, and it doesn't work. It's short-circuit. It's cognitive overload is the name of it. Pardon me?
I'm sure, like me, your favorite phrase from a public speaker is, I know none of you at the back of the room are going to be able to see this slide.
Right, right. I love that. No, it's when they say, you can't really see this, but.
Yeah.
And then, that's the opposite of a visual aid, right? If you can't see it, it can't be a visual aid.
You
So
have,
here's the
you have
thing.
to know that I do everything I can to stop myself from bursting out laughing when they say that.
Yeah.
Having been trained by the best, reading your book and listening to you.
Well, that's very sweet. So here's the thing. Now that we're all presenting remotely right now, because there's no other option at the moment, when you have PowerPoint and you're presenting, the PowerPoint is the thing that is being seen. You're seen maybe, as we are right now, in small boxes across the top. More likely you're seen in a little corner at the bottom right of your screen, and you're remote. So it behooves you even more to have visual aids that are truly aids for the audience, which means they have to be images, meaningful, purposeful, well-crafted and designed and thought through images. If you just have text in your PowerPoint slides, then your audience, if they can download it, they're just going to download it and walk away. They're not going to stick around for the presentation because there's no reason to.
Sure. No, it's you just brought up a point that I hadn't focused on before. If you're, a lot of what you do is performance. The slides are there, but they're sort of incidental. With Zoom, if you're sharing your screen, you're not there except for in this little box, and people can't see your body language.
That's right. So here's the other thing, Matt, that's really interesting. So for your audience especially, because forgive me for painting a broad brushstroke over this, but typically financial people are not people who really want to be in the spotlight, right? They're not your song and dance man, usually. And I've met many members of your Connecticut chapter of the FANG over the years, and I think we could say that was most true. They're wonderful people. They have terrific skills. They just don't need to be the center of attention, which is great. The thing that's great about a properly constructed PowerPoint deck is that you, the presenter, do not have to be charismatic. You absolutely positively do not have to be a performer, which, by the way, a presentation is not a performance, it's a communication between you and the audience. So the beauty of a well-constructed PowerPoint slide deck is that it has images and it has animation, and all you're doing as the presenter is clicking and explaining to your audience what they're looking at. That's all you have to do is click and explain and click and explain. And they're riveted because they can't make sense of what they're seeing without you to explain it. So they're not going to go anywhere. And all you have to do is explain what they're looking at.
Now, do you recommend bouncing back and forth between your shared screen and you, the presenter?
I don't. I've seen technology recently where you can have yourself on one side of the screen and your slides on another, kind of elevated. So your slides are about maybe a third of the screen. And I need to look into that more to see how that, the technology of that, I've not researched that fully yet. My gut feeling is this: if you introduce yourself in the beginning so that you're full screen as I am now, and then you say to your audience, now I'm going to share with you my slides, and then you click into slideshow, and so into slideshow mode, so they're seeing the slides animate, and you're here. If the slides are as compelling as they should be, your audience isn't going to mind that you're down here in the corner, because they're riveted to. And by the way, brains work really well when you marry an image with a narrative. That's called dual coding. And that's the way brains love to work. They love to see an image and then hear the explanation with language. So it's image and language. And when it comes together, it's truly synergistic. And your brain is saying, yes, give me more, give me more. So they're not missing so much in full screen.
One of the things Peggy's been telling me is that I know you use hand gestures a lot. How are you managing that with Zoom? They kind of look at the screen a bit. You know, they're
I know.
not strong
So
enough.
I'm making sure when I gesture, even in a webinar, that my hands are here. Do you see how my hands are here by my face?
Okay.
So that you can see what I'm doing, and I will do that in a webinar. Now, today I just gave a webinar at 1 o'clock, and I had one hand on the clicker, so I was gesturing with one hand. You know, it's the same thing that you see people do on the nightly news when they're sitting at a desk. That they'll make sure that they're gesturing above the desk. So it's a matter of seeing being aware of where the frame is for your audience.
Yeah, one of the things I've been disappointed with on Zoom is that I can't be in the picture with you. You know, like Chris Cuomo and his guest. They haven't fixed that yet, but I hope they will. They're getting a lot of money, and I hope they fix that. So
you can't see Chris Cuomo
on CNN.
Yeah.
Andrew's younger brother.
Oh, that's interesting.
Whoever you want from CNN, they have both people on the screen, and Zoom hasn't done that yet. I can either spotlight you or spotlight me.
Because you have a lot of other people on the call. If it were just the two of us, you could.
Yeah.
Right. If it were just the two of us on Zoom, you could do that. You could see both of us the same size.
Right. It would be interesting. Peggy has a question. You need to unmute.
I did. Debbie, two things. One, and I noticed even with you, I'm also a hand gesturing person, and I agree keeping your hands away from your face, but that people can see it. But what I've found on Zoom, especially, is that if you don't really slow down those movements, it gets very, even if I was out here, it gets very wiggly looking. So it's really, to me, it's really important. I try not to use my hands as much as I did, because then it's dizzy. And so I think it's a matter of, if you're going to use them, you have to slow it down. But I liked your point of not only that, but keeping them up high. My second question to you is, you're talking, and I have always embraced what you said about the pictures and the visual and very few words. I'm concerned if you're doing a presentation on Zoom and you share your screen, and your screen is a picture which grabs the audience, gives them something to hang on to, but then they can keep that in their head, and now they're just staring at that instead of looking at you, which is why I'm almost wondering if giving them a little bit of time, and if you're going to talk, coming back, because it's your personality and you that's really selling the story, not just your picture. And we can hold that image, or am I wrong?
Well, you're not wrong if it were just a static picture, which is not what I'm advocating. So in a presentation that I give or that I build for my clients, I think years ago, and let's say with UNICEF, the US Fund for UNICEF is a client of mine. So when I build presentations for them, I'm absolutely using amazing evocative photos of the world's children and even, the aid that they're getting via UNICEF, et cetera, et cetera. What would happen now if it were being remotely would be that things would change more, so that you don't just leave an image on the screen and it's static and you're talking. That's not what you can do. It has to be that it's something that is moving, that is changing with purpose, not just because you want to be showing a bunch of different things, because it's indicative of the point that you're trying to make. Your images always have to be driven by the message. So for example, right now I'm building a presentation for a sales expert. And what I'm using are icons. I'm using icons that I've labeled, and they will appear no more than 5 icons on a screen. And sometimes if he's trying to indicate something that is getting more or less, there will be an arrow next to it with the percentage in the arrow. It's that kind of a thing. So I'm not talking about photos, because that really wouldn't make sense. And even with UNICEF, the photo is to evoke emotion, but then we had slides that were iconography where things moved, or there were flow charts or something. For you all, Matt, for a financial audience, what I think for your financial professionals who are delivering presentations still that are about the health of an organization, the goals of an organization. They could be persuading about something, trying to get the executive team to adhere to a budget, etc. Then things like bar charts, line charts are super helpful in bringing that point across. And so to go on with this particular example, then what I would have is a line chart. Maybe you have a line chart to show what's been going on for the past 5 years, because maybe in your company over the last 5 years, people have been fuzzier and fuzzier about adhering to the budget, right? So every year your margins are getting smaller and smaller, your profits are getting smaller and smaller. You as the financial professional in the organization would show 1 year, and then the next year, and then the next year. You wouldn't put up all 5 lines on the screen with all the text that explains it, and then say, here, you can see what's been happening for the last 5 years. You would tell the story year by year visually.
Oh, okay. So just like no editorial is really complete without my beating people up about outgoing signatures, I would like you to discuss the magic rule of 3s. I have explained it to many people, but you do such a better job.
Yeah, not so the magic rule of 3s, I call it magic. It's really just a rule of 3s. Some people that are on this call, they already know of it. It's simply the idea that as human beings, we organize our thoughts in 3s. And I'll give you examples, which will trigger your own examples over the next few days. Stop, yield, and go, here, there, and everywhere. The genie grants you 3 wishes. Goldilocks and the 3 bears. The 3 little pigs. Past, present, and future. Beginning, middle, and end. By the way, in a business presentation, if you are trying to talk about something in the business world, it's typically either problem, solution, result, or goal, solution, result. That's 3s. And the reason why it's important to know that human beings organize their thoughts in terms of 3 is because when you are constructing your presentation, it would help your audience if you constructed it in 3 buckets. And for financial professionals, it's super easy, because typically you're asked to report on, here's where we were the last time we met, here's where we are now, and here's where we're going, or here's where I hope we're going, here's where I'm recommending we're going. So that's 3.
So it's just a natural way of thinking.
Well, it is a natural way of thinking. Unfortunately, particularly because so many of us have so much going on and we're in a big hurry and we're copying and pasting slides into our presentation, we don't take enough time to stop and think about how to organize the material to make it easy for our audience to take it in, make sense of it, and then be able to remember it, which is the goal.
So you didn't mention what happens when you give them too many points.
So that's adjacent to the rule of threes, actually, Matt. That is actually related to a study by a man by the last name of Miller in the 1950s, who did a ton of research about how many discrete pieces of information a human being can hold in their head at one time. And the title of the result of this research was the magic, the magic number 7 plus or minus 2.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so that's why when you give a pitch presentation, you should only give 5 benefits. So 5 benefits of working with your organization, 5 benefits of adhering to a budget. Whatever you're pitching, whatever you're proposing, you may have in the benefit part, in the what's in it for them part, you may have 5 benefits. The reason is because everybody will pick their favorite 3.
Oh, okay.
You can cast your net as wide as 5, no wider than 5. 5 is, after 5 is diminishing returns. That's when people drop everything you're telling them and just get angry and move on to something else.
Sure. Well, that's what I tell people when I do, we do 90-second announcements at our meeting. I said, tell me 3 things about you, because when you go to the 4th, I'm going to be really struggling to remember the first 3. And when you give me 5, I'm basically going to forget everything you've told me.
Well, you have a very good point, because guess what? To this point of yours, in the early 2000s, the same study was done again. And at that point, they determined that it was now the magic number 4 plus or minus 1. So whereas in the 50s, we could remember 7 plus or minus 2, these days we can remember 4 plus or minus 1. It's gotten worse. It doesn't bother me at all, because in my opinion, we have iPhones, so we don't need to be remembering the amount of information that we used to be required to remember.
Well, when I tell the story about you should know it's about the beach balls.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know. When we're all allowed to go out again.
Last time you brought the beach balls, as I recall, they were almost totally deflated.
That's right. So when we get to go out in public again and deliver live presentations, I am going to buy myself all new beach balls to do that demo with.
Oh, okay, good. Because that demonstration where you dropped all the balls was very powerful.
Right. Once you're holding on to more than 5 balls, you can't hold them anymore, so you drop all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we do. That's what we do in our minds. Yeah.
We have a little over 5 minutes. Are there questions? Because if there aren't, we're going to just keep talking.
Great.
So this whole Zoom thing is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly people segued into this form of communication. And I've been involved in, probably half a dozen presentations already. Well, wow, more than that. So I've given half a dozen probably or more. And then I've helped build some as well that are being delivered via Zoom. We practice them via Zoom. I will say this, that I've noticed with my own presentations, and thus those that I'm building for clients, is that I am building more visual cues than I would normally if it were just they standing in front of an audience or me standing in front of an audience. There are more things to help them connect what the presenter is saying with what they are seeing.
Yeah, to me, it's been breathtaking how quickly everybody's embraced Zoom.
Yeah.
Again,
I have a question for Debbie.
Yeah, go ahead.
Debbie, is there any software that you would recommend over another software when creating these visual presentations? I usually only use the PowerPoint. So I wanted to know if there's any other software that you use or you've heard of or you recommend. I've been using a lot of BI tools, but BI tools don't necessarily allow you to tell a story. I then have to do a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not sure what the other tool was that you were mentioning. I use PowerPoint just because 95% of my clients are in Microsoft. So I didn't even get into Keynote. And as you probably know, Keynote and PowerPoint easily go back and forth pretty easily between one another. So that hasn't been an issue for me. I used Prezi years ago with a client that I was working with. I find it more flash than substance. What I will tell you is this, that has been a huge, huge win for me in developing presentations for myself and for my clients. And that is a website that's called the Noun Project. And the Noun Project is this huge library of icons. And I pay for a subscription so that I don't have to attribute. I pay to use these icons, and you can too, and it's very reasonable. And I even, you have the ability with the Noun Project to even create icons that are the same colors as your brand, or just white. You could use white, or which is really easy, because then you can make the big part of your slide a color of your own icon or your brand, which I highly recommend. And then the icon is white, which works really well too. So I found that very helpful for me in helping my clients tell their stories visually.
So that's great. Are there other tools that, if you're thinking about old PowerPoint and presenting live, and you're thinking about Zoom, are there some do's and don'ts that come to mind? Obviously before you had these golden presentations, how are you changing them for Zoom? Is there anything?
Oh, the only thing I've done with my presentations is, as I said, I have, in fact, there are presentations that I showed at the Fang 3 years ago, where I was like the shoemaker's children going barefoot. My slides had very few words on them, but I wasn't using iconography. So now they're different. Now the slides all have an icon and the label underneath, or the phrase underneath, because I know if you are using images while you are telling your story, you are getting retention from your audience upwards of 80%, 80%.
Oh,
and that's huge.
cool.
And with Zoom, Matt, now that they really are just seeing the slides and they're only seeing me in a little corner, as I said, what I'm doing is I am using more images than I would were I live, because God gave me way too much energy. So when I'm in front of an audience, I'm so distracted that I can't have a lot going on behind me. I just have to have like the main idea going on behind me. But now that I'm on Zoom, I do need to give them more visual cues.
Any other platforms you recommend? That's a question from Liz Weiner.
Like Zoom, as opposed to, actually, if it's talking about.
I'm sure, since you're dealing in a corporate environment, there are other platforms that you've been exposed to.
Yeah, and they're way clunkier than Zoom.
Are they really? Like Google Hangouts or something?
Yes, I was on Google Hangouts about a month ago now with a big event that was a client's client event. And there were about, I think there were about 60 people on this webinar. And it was a customized webinar for this client. And they wanted to host it on their Google Hangout. And I had gotten on, because you taught me this, Matt, this expression, belt and suspenders.
Yes, right.
that expression 12 years ago, I think. So we had gotten on the call like 30 minutes early because and by the way, before that, the week before that,
Yeah.
I had kept going to Google Hangouts myself and gone in and loaded my PowerPoint and looked at it and clicked around. It looked fine. Everything looked fine.
Yeah.
And then this young girl and I got on the day of the presentation 30 minutes early. She turned the controls over to me. I clicked through my PowerPoint deck. Everything looked fine. And then she took it over again for a minute. She talked. The host introduced me. Lo and behold, I am clicking, I can't control the slides. I had to leave the meeting and go back in.
Wow. I would tell you that Peggy would share this story with you. She was doing a PowerPoint presentation, and when she started clicking through it, her computer started installing Windows 10.
I was laughing. Yeah, it wasn't funny. Yeah, no.
It wasn't funny. It was scary and it took forever. And I had to just go on doing my presentation without my slides. They were, and in the background, it was just a screen with Microsoft controlling my computer. And then I had to wait.
Wow.
It was awful. And it took over because I was connected to the internet in this company. And it just decided to take me over.
Wow.
So you
Yeah.
got, as you said, belt and suspenders.
Right.
Printed copies of her presentation that she could work from, but nothing up on the screen. The show must go on.
Yeah. That's a shame.
I try to keep to the 30 minutes that I've promised everybody. I would hate to cut you off even after an hour or two, but if there's one more question, we can answer one more question. Someone can unmute their mic. I don't think anybody would complain. You're so entertaining that missing 5 minutes of their life isn't going to matter. Anybody?
I see.
I don't know. Looking at the chat remarks.
Right.
All right. Well, this has been highly educational.
Tons of fun.
I'm going to take over the screen and kind of say goodbye to everybody. I want to thank all of you for joining Chat with Matt. We're trying to do one of these every day. I don't know if I'm going to last or I'm going to run out of speakers at some point. But for the moment, while everybody's in lockdown, I'm trying very hard to find people with something to say, like Debbie. And I hope all of you will sign up for more Chats with Matt. So Debbie's information was in the meeting announcement if you want to write to her. And certainly visit her website and buy her book. She needs the money. And you'll get a lot out of it. It's a great book. So that'll be it for today for Chat with Matt. And I want to thank all of you for your participation and or rather for your attention. And if I can be of service to anyone, I actually do answer my own phone and love to talk with you and chat privately. So thank you. I'm going to end the meeting now. Debbie, thank you so much. You were
Thanks,
as I expected. Take care.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe.